we're back. This is Veterans in Politics with Steve Sanson, Andre Haynes, and Karen Steelmon. Karen Steelmon is running a little bit behind schedule, but me and Andre is here hanging out. And before we go on to any of our rants and announcements, I just want to say we're going to have Steve Wolfson, the Clark County District Attorney. He's going to be interviewed for the whole hour today. Andre, what's going on, brother?
Hey, just enjoying triple digits and a good Father's Day weekend in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah. Father's Day is one of those days that, I don't know, it's not really my thing, though, but, I'll hang out.
Well, it's the one day of the year other than Christmas when fathers can look forward to gifts, or if you haven't been the best father, some of those phone calls. Yeah,
and then some of your kids that you discipline and put them on the road to a happy and healthier life, they don't appreciate it, though.
They may not say it, but they do.
Yeah. Well, I don't know all the time. But let me make a couple of announcements. The Veterans in Politics on July 14th, which is a Saturday, we are going to be interviewing Clark County District Court judges, candidates for Departments 4 and 14th at the Marine Corps Leatherneck Club between 4 and 6. And, folks, if you don't know who those candidates are, it's a seat that Judge Mosley and Judge Hardcastle vacated. And I believe there is 9 candidates that's going to be on the ballot for Department 4, and 2 candidates are going to be on the ballot for Department 14th as well. And I just want to let everybody know that on Monday we are having a celebration for Judge Rodney Burr of Henderson and Judge Victor Miller of Boulder City, and it's going to be at Tivoli
Village.
Tivoli Village. Why do I call it Tivoli?
That's okay.
I'm always putting, you know what? I think that I mix things up,
We all do.
Yeah. Tivoli Village, you want to give them the exact...
Yes, Tivoli Village, located at 410 South Rampart Boulevard, inside the Rotunda building, in suite number 390, located on the 3rd floor. There'll be signage. Look for the Veterans in Politics logo and Endeavor Media Group, and come join us.
Yeah, that's going to be at 7 p.m. on Monday, June 18th. And both of these judges have a total of 50 years on the bench. So come on down and hang out and see who these judges are that's been representing you for the past 50 years. And there's another event coming up, right, Angel?
There sure is. And this one is going to be on Tuesday. And this is going to be at Dewberry Fashions. It's Derek David, the former lead singer of the Platters, is going to perform to benefit Rhonda Gibson, the widow of Army Gulf War veteran Stanley Gibson. And that's at 7 p.m.
Do you have any rants, announcements?
You know what? I took a look at the announcement Obama made on Friday. It was pretty interesting, and they interviewed some students, and heard some interesting comments. It it just kind of made me reflect on my own situation. A few years ago, I went through the process to apply for dual citizenship in another country, and it was expensive. It was time consuming. I had to produce a lot of paperwork and go through the process. I had to take the medical test. So it gave me a new level of respect for, permanent residents and, people who have obtained their travel visas and different types of things to come into the country. It made me respect the process and those who, follow the rules. And so, and considering some of the comments that other people made, it was, comparing it to myself, it was kind of like, wow, one thing I never have noticed whenever people talk about immigration, in the media, you notice they always get comments from people who are undocumented and people who go against the process or contrary to the rules, but they never grab someone who took 10 years to become a citizen or 5 years to obtain the right to live or work in the country. We never hear their side of the story.
You know what? I think President Obama probably needs to push to get the VA claims moving a lot quickly than what they're doing right now. I think maybe he should concentrate on his efforts with actual American citizens that are here struggling for jobs and struggling to make this country better, that are being ousted out of their homes and ousted out of the workplace. Maybe that's where he should put his concentration on. What do you think?
You know, that's a very good point, but, you know, it comes down to votes and it comes down to raising money. And
well, they can't vote anyway, so what's the problem? Isn't that true? He should just concentrate on the American voters instead of the American undocumented workers that can't vote.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Unless you know something I don't. Could they vote?
They can't vote, but you know you can still make contributions. You can still donate money and tell your family and friends and neighbors to vote.
Well, so is the other folks too, as well, right?
Yeah.
And you get a vote out of it.
I think the next time he or his wife comes to Vegas, you should have a sit down with them and talk to him about that.
Maybe I should. You have anything else, Andrew?
Nope.
All right. Well, let's take a commercial break. We're going to be back in a couple minutes. This is Steve Sanson and Andre Haynes with Veterans in Politics. Don't go away, folks. A full hour with Steve Wolfson, Clark County District Attorney.
Sweet Cheeks with the curvaceous bounty of Sin City. In this election year, knowledge is power. Know the issues, know the candidates, and remember to vote. Your vote is your voice. And besides, you get a really cool sticker.
All right, folks, we are back. This is Veterans in Politics Talk Show with Andre Haynes, Steve Sanson. We have live in studio Steve Wolfson, Clark County District Attorney. How you doing today, Mr. DA?
I'm good, Mr. Sanson. How are you and Andre?
We're very good. It's been a while since you've been on our program. I remember the last time you were on is when you first took office as the city councilman for Las Vegas. I forgot, what ward was that?
Ward 2, the best ward in the city of Las Vegas.
I think other councilmen might or women might disagree with that statement, Mr. DA. But I've known you for a very long time now, and in fact, Veterans in Politics have supported you in your appointment to the district attorney's office, and we're proud to say that. But why don't you give us a bio before we get into any kind of line of questions?
Sure, Steve. I was born in Los Angeles, born and raised there, did all my post-high school education in San Diego, moved to Las Vegas in 1980, started my career in the Clark County District Attorney's Office as a law clerk and then a deputy district attorney for about 5.5 years. Then went over to the federal government. I was a federal prosecutor for almost 2 years. Went into the private practice of law, which is what I've been doing for about 25 years. About 7.5 years ago, I really decided to complicate the heck out of my life. So I ran for public office for the first time and was fortunate enough to win a seat to the city council. And I served on the Las Vegas City Council for about 7.5 years until I was fortunate enough to be appointed to be the current Clark County District Attorney.
And you know something, your position as the district attorney, I know that's not going to be a very easy job. And it's like family court. There's no winners. No matter what you say, what you do, there's always going to be somebody upset with you, correct? Is that a fair statement?
Well, sometimes. I mean, as the top prosecutor in Clark County, my role with my 110 criminal prosecutors is to seek justice. And that means that if we feel a person has committed a crime and we have sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that person committed a crime, we're going to charge that person with a crime. Now, every time generally there's a crime, there's oftentimes a victim. There's a victim's family, there's a defendant, there's police officers involved, and sometimes the perspectives are not consistent. But generally speaking, my job is to prosecute persons who have committed crimes, and I think that generally the public is in favor of that. So most of the time I think I have what the community wants in mind, and that's to seek justice in the particular cases.
Well, we have several line of questions for you, and I'm going to go with, I think, probably probably will be the most easiest one is Veterans Court. And I know in your campaign trail, you were talking about Veterans Court, and I know that the Veterans Court law, I believe, is NRS 176A. It says that each judge is supposed to ask a defendant if they're a military veteran. It says that once they put them in a program and they completed whatever program they have, that the case is supposed to be dismissed and the case is supposed to be sealed. But a lot of your prosecutors are not following that NRS code. Could you help us out with that?
Sure. Well, Steve, the law does provide for a veterans court. The problem is that there isn't enough funding presently to do it right. I think we have one judge that has volunteered to act as the veterans court judge, if you will. But there's more criteria than just what you said, Steve, to be perfectly frank. Not every veteran would qualify. Not every case would qualify. Not every offense would qualify. So it depends on the case. It depends on the situation. It depends on the circumstances. But the bottom line is I'm in favor of a more proactive veterans court and a more proactive view towards recognizing that, like other specialty courts, there's a need for veterans to at least be recognized because of special situations.
All right, I'll give you a good example. Right now, the Veterans Court is, the way the law reads, is for nonviolent offense, and the DUI is a nonviolent offense. The way the law reads...
Well, it can be. Now remember...
I guess if you cause bodily injury, then it can be a violent offense. But let's say somebody was picked up on a DUI. According to NRS 176, it says that if it's identified that the person is a veteran, first-time offender, that they're supposed to go through a program, a veterans court program, whatever it might be, DUI or drunk, whatever, alcohol management. And then the case is supposed to be sealed and dismissed. But I heard that there's another law that says you can't dismiss or seal a DUI case. So it looks like two laws are contradicting each other. How are we going to fix that?
I'm not sure if that statute, which speaks about veterans and how some cases and some situations, for example, nonviolent offenses, would be dismissed and sealed, because you're right. You pointed out that under the DUI statutory scheme, a prosecutor cannot plea bargain or reduce a DUI case if he can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that's not a product of the prosecutor's office. That's a product of our legislature. And that rule has been in effect for many, many years. There's a similar rule with regard to domestic violence cases. So if a veteran is charged with a misdemeanor DUI, assuming there is no injury or no death, it's a straightforward misdemeanor DUI, I don't think that case would qualify for the Veterans Court in the sense that it would then be dismissed and sealed if the person were to comply with all the court orders.
So what are you saying, that if they complied, you would dismiss and seal? No,
what I'm saying is that I don't think the statute that applies to veterans where some cases can be dismissed would apply in a DUI case. But I'm not positive. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not positive. It hasn't been asked of me yet.
Well, basically, I could tell you I sat in Judge Barker's chambers, and we went through the whole of NRS 176. And it says that a nonviolent case, that after the veteran complies with the judge's requirement, that the case is supposed to be dismissed and sealed. And a DUI, if it doesn't cause bodily injury, is a nonviolent case, so it should be dismissed.
But we don't have an active veterans court. We don't have a veterans court that is up and running with a judge that is the veterans court judge.
Judge Tobias and Judge Mark Stephen and Henderson.
Yeah, there's a couple of judges, like you say, that have volunteered to act as a judge that would apply certain.
And Martin Hastings, just to bring
Marty Hastings in Las Vegas Municipal.
Interrupt for a minute.
Oh, is this Karen Steelmon?
Yes, I'm Karen. I'm the Auxiliary Director for Veterans and Politics. And if you could clarify for us exactly what it means to have a veterans court. Is it a separate courtroom with a separate judge set up just for veterans issues? Or is it a procedure within an existing courtroom?
It is a statutory framework that is created by our legislature, which provides for a veterans court by law. But it doesn't provide necessarily the funding.
Yeah,
So if
that doesn't really answer what I asked.
Well, it does, because you're asking me if there is an ability to provide for a veterans court. What I'm saying is the law provides for it, but we don't have necessarily the funding. My office is funded by the county. The courts are funded by the county. So if they don't fund us a judge that will sit in particular to hear all veterans court cases, then we don't have a per se veterans court.
So the definition of a veterans court then would be a separate courtroom established specifically to hear veterans issues, with a judge appointed specifically to hear veterans issues.
Generally, yes. It doesn't have to be a separate courtroom.
Okay.
It could be.
Well, that answers my next question. Then, what would funding actually have to? What would it require?
It would require funding by our county commission to fund perhaps a new judge that would sit as a veterans court judge, or to fund a new program, which means staff, which means personnel, which means a separate district attorney, which means a separate potentially public defender, things like that.
But
would that really be necessary? Separate?
Well, could I?
Well, how many veterans would we have?
Could I piggyback on there?
How many veterans would we have coming through this courtroom? There's a lot.
There's a lot. There's 339,000 veterans in the state of Nevada.
Yeah. That's a lot of. Well, no, they're all not going to get in trouble, obviously, because the Veterans Court is designed for persons.
You don't know that.
Well, Veterans Court is designed for persons that are charged with crimes.
I'll tell you exactly what Commissioner Steve Sisolak told me when I brought that up to him. He goes, "They're already in the system anyway. So what's the difference? They're in the system anyway. Why do you need to separate them? Make a separate? They're already in the system. You got to deal with them anyway. So why don't you just deal with them as a veteran according to NRS 176?"
I can tell you that from my perspective as the Clark County District Attorney, if a veterans court is set up by the county, in other words, a judge, a court clerk, a court reporter, the staff, the marshals to supervise and to police these courts, my office can put a prosecutor in the veterans court. I don't have the ability to handle the entire system. I have the ability to put a prosecutor in a courtroom. So if a veterans court is established, or if there is a judge who will sit as an ad hoc veterans judge and hear cases pursuant to that statute, I will have a prosecutor there to follow the law.
You know, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, Mr. DA. Maybe we should just have a union that protects the veterans, like we have a union that protects the cops from going through police coroner's inquest procedures.
Well, you're getting so ahead of me, Steve.
Maybe veterans need a union too, because apparently police officers being protected by the Las Vegas Police Protection Association. That's why the coroner's inquest has been jammed up since 2010. Maybe we need a veterans union to protect our military veterans that protected this country against prosecution as well. What do you think?
What I think is that if there is a veterans court set up, if there is a judge, which Steve?
No, I'm pretty sure he knows exactly.
She loves both of us.
My point is that if there is a procedure to allow for veterans to be treated under the statutory scheme that is set up, I have 110 prosecutors just assigned to my criminal division, and I can spare a prosecutor to be in that courtroom to participate in the process of a veterans court.
Well, veterans court is a very serious issue, and I hate to get off the subject, but since Steve did bring up the subject, let's talk about the Police Protective Association. Do you not see it as a conflict of interest, your change from that position with the Police Protective Association to district attorney?
Don't you have me mixed up with somebody else?
I probably do.
Yeah, I think you have a mix-up.
As it was coming out of my mouth, I was like...
you have a mix-up with the former DA, Dave Roger.
That's right.
No, these two individuals are very much separate from each other.
My apologies.
I got your back on that.
Is it public records the amount of funding needed for, say, a veterans court, so that maybe we could send a petition to the county commission to help raise funds for that?
Well, let me answer it this way, Andre. We currently have other specialty courts. We have a DUI court. We have a domestic violence court. We have a competency court, a mental health court. So we already have specialty courts set in place. So it would require funding for that specialized court process, if you will. So it would require funding for a judge, a position for a prosecutor, a position for a public defender, and certain staff, if you will. How much money that would cost? It could cost $500,000 annually.
But as far as treatment is concerned, all they got to do is send them to the Veteran Administration to get treated. I mean, it's nothing out of
but we have
the
to
county or the city
monitor.
pocket.
We have to monitor that. You have to have prosecutors that are going to have to leave one courtroom to go to another courtroom. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm there.
Right.
And if a veterans court is established, a formal veterans court, not just a judge that hears a couple of cases as they come up, if a formal veterans court is established, like the other specialty courts, I will have a prosecutor in that court.
Well, to be quite honest with you, they're doing the formal veterans court in Churchill and Washoe County. In fact, the specialty court operator over there is State Senator Sheila Leslie, and she runs it. There's a judge that hears veterans court issues. And you know something? Washoe and Churchill County doesn't even have half the population we have down here. And they establish a veterans court down there. So I don't know what's going on with Clark County.
Neither do I.
Would it be a feasible, viable option to have sitting judges just consider the fact that a person's a veteran in the case that they're already hearing, rather than setting up an entire separate system?
That's a great question. I don't think our judges have been educated enough on the issue and the existence is the better word of the statutes that make available certain procedures for veterans. Like we have Judge Tobiasen that sits once in a while, but there is no formal process where, if you're a veteran, then your case may qualify for this special treatment.
I think it's the first Friday of every month she sits on veterans court issues. I'm not sure about Judge Hastings and Judge Stevens when they sit, but I know that Judge Stevens graduated a few veterans a couple months ago, and he sealed their records and he dismissed the case as well, just like NRS 176 says.
Good.
But, let's move right along, Mr. DA. In the military, we're held to a higher standards. If we do a crime off base, we should be subjected to a civilian court, and we will be subjected to a military court for the same crime. There is no such thing as double jeopardy in the military. We gave up most of our constitutional rights when we put on the uniform. We swore to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign domestic. Why is it that officers and elected officials have a special treatment that as if they're above the law, so to speak?
I don't know that police officers or elected officials are given special treatment because I can name, in the 31 years that I've been here in Las Vegas, a number of instances where elected officials have been charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison, as well as police officers who have been charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison for criminal offenses.
Okay, let me ask you a couple questions then. How many police shootings need a court inquest right now?
19.
How many police officers are on paid administrative leave?
You'd have to ask the sheriff.
Okay. What are the... So then you won't know what is the first officer in the... Let me put it to you this way. How long has an officer been on paid administrative leave from the very first shooting that has not been heard at a coroner's inquest?
Steve, you're asking me for statistics that are internal to primarily the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Whether a person is suspended, leave with pay, leave without pay, taken off the streets and put on a desk job is an internal disciplinary decision made by the sheriff. The district attorney has nothing to do with that. So if you ask me, in the last 22 months or so, since we've had an officer-involved use of force death case where we haven't had an inquest, what status those individual officers hold right now, I couldn't tell you.
Well,
don't you think that it's something that you should know?
Well, I will tell you this. I know generally that if a police officer is involved in a use of force resulting in the death of a citizen, that Metro looks at the case carefully. Oftentimes they take the officers off the street and put them in non-patrol assignments, pending either an inquest, which used to occur every 6 to 8 weeks after an event, or now pending the written decision that my office is releasing whether or not we're going to charge an officer with a crime. So you're talking about 19 cases, 18 of them which happened before I took office. We've only had one officer-involved use of force death since I took office. So 18 of the 19 occurred before I took office. The status of those officers, I've issued 8 decisions in the last 45 days. So there are at least 8 officers, if not potentially more, because sometimes there's a witness officer or another officer that was present, who have been informed that there won't be a criminal prosecution brought against them. So when the sheriff learns that, the sheriff can then decide whether to put them back into normal duty or not. So that leaves another 11 cases that are still pending, along with the first 8, a coroner's inquest, and then another 11 that are pending a written decision from my office. So where they are status-wise employment, that's an internal employer-employee situation between the sheriff and his employees.
Well, let me just say one that I'm familiar with is the Stanley Gibson shooting that took place on December 12th of last year. There's 4 officers. You got an LT, a sergeant, and 2 officers that have been on paid administrative leave for the past 6 months. So they're sitting at home for the past 6 months, and it costs taxpayers a little over $500,000 already on those 4 officers. If that was a civilian, would it wait that long?
Probably not.
What's the difference between the police officer and the regular populace?
That's a question you'd have to ask his employer. That is
my question to you is...
Let me answer the question. You're asking me why the employer allows for his employee to be under that status of leave with pay. That is between the employer and the employee. The district attorney's office has nothing to do with that decision.
Well, as a person who's holding an office, the interest of which is to serve the people and not the police department or the officers, even if your office isn't directly responsible or involved with those decisions, you as a human being who's interested in serving the people would, with your position, should be able to know the avenues by which you would most be effective in changing something that's unjust. And that is unjust.
What about this? Why hasn't the officers been charged or put before a grand jury to find out if there's any type of wrongdoing in that particular case?
Well, of the 19 cases that are still awaiting inquest, 18 of which occurred before I took office, and like I said, 1 that occurred since I took office, we are issuing written decisions whether or not these officers committed crimes or not in the chronological order in which the event occurred, because I decided that was the fairest way of doing it. Rather than pick and choose the first case, 7th, 9th, 12th, 14th case, I went back in time to the first case which had not received an inquest, and I'm moving forward in time to issue these written decisions. These written decisions are each approximately 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 pages in length, and these decisions are written after review of case files. Each case file is approximately 3 to 5 binders in volume. So these decisions don't get turned around quickly. We spend a lot of time reviewing these decisions. I have top experienced lawyers that review the case. Then we staff them with a group of experienced lawyers. The decision goes through a first draft, a second draft, and then sometimes a third draft. Like I said, I've issued 8 decisions. 3 more are coming out next week. The next 3 have been assigned.
Could you give us the skinny on that?
Of course not.
Well, the
next 3 will be out about 3 or 4 weeks later. So in the next 60 to 90 days, all 19 cases will have been reviewed with written decisions which explain the conduct of the police officer and all of these decisions that are still awaiting inquest. I'm not waiting for inquest, because what I found was that traditionally the inquest would occur, like I said, within 6 to 8 weeks of the event. So we'd have a public hearing. We'd have a hearing where the public, the officers, the decedent's family, anybody that was interested would have a public hearing to see what happened. We haven't had an inquest in 22 months. I didn't have to do this. I thought it was best for this community, like other district attorneys and other counties.
Then you did have to do that. It is best for the community. That's your job.
Well, I didn't have to do this. There's no rule that requires me to do this.
Do you need a rule to do what's best for the community?
I need I do what is best for the community, and when I saw there's a void because we're not having inquests, I decided to fill this void, even though there is no rule. So that's why I'm issuing these written decisions.
Some officers like that, the way that you decided to make the ruling without the coroner's inquest. But Mr. DA, your first decision as the Clark County District Attorney blew me away. It just really it did. I couldn't understand it. Maybe you could explain it. According to this particular incident had the Henderson police chief, Juana Chambers, to resign. Also, this particular incident, I don't know why the Henderson police held on to the footage of that video as long as they did, but they did. You have Sergeant Seekatz. Seekatz. You had a diabetic victim, even if he didn't even know he was diabetic. Like, call him a drunk driver. But he was held down on the ground, out of his car, by 4 or 5 officers. Held down, face down. He wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't a threat to nobody. And then you had this one Sergeant Seekatz decide that he was going to jump out of his car. Maybe he's pissed off because he had to chase him down. Maybe he spilled his coffee or something. He'd come out of his car and kick this guy in the head 5 times. And it cost the Henderson police chief her job. Okay? He still has his job. He's still a cop. And I don't know why, as a DA, you didn't let the grand jury decide on if this particular officer should face prosecution or not. You took it upon yourself to say that I don't know, but correct me if I'm wrong. You said that time has lapsed, but then I took it upon myself. What happens if that was a drug dealer or a gangbanger caught on video kicking a cop in the head 5 times? and the same time went away. It's been the same time. Would you charge that particular gangbanger or civilian or what have you for doing exactly the same thing that Officer Seekatz did?
You know, Steve, I was equally bothered when I first saw that video. I saw that video about 2 weeks before I took office, and I was bothered by that video as well. That incident occurred about 1.5 years before the video became public. Why the video was not released to the public or made public before that, I can't explain that. But that was a matter that was brought to my attention the first couple of weeks I took office. And we conducted an investigation. By the way, there is a written decision that gives the legal analysis as to why we didn't charge Officer Seekatz with the crime. So if you want to look at the particulars, you can look to the written decision. But the bottom line is this. As much as this community was offended by what they saw in the video, and myself as well, this was a particular police department which provided in written materials the right to use the kicking of his foot to bring a person who was resisting arrest into compliance. It's in writing. It's in their use of force police and practice manuals. Let me just finish one thing. And in addition to that, about 30 days or so before the incident, this officer had received specific training regarding the use of force, which included his right to use his foot in a kicking mode. Let me finish. To bring a person who was resisting arrest into compliance. So as the prosecutor, what I had to decide is whether or not we could prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. I had a police officer that was specifically trained with it gave him the right to use his foot to effectuate an arrest. So in my opinion, we couldn't prove that officer guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
But the officer, but the suspect was not resisting arrest. The suspect had 4 or 5 officers at the top of him.
He was already under control.
He wasn't going anywhere.
That is not true. You're factually incorrect.
According to the video.
Well, I've seen the video about 15 times. And what Mr. Green was doing on the video was he was refusing to pull his hands behind his back. He was resisting. He kept trying to pull his hands under his stomach near his waist. And one of the things officers are taught in Police Officer 101 is you never let a person get their hands near their belt because you don't know what is in their belt area. Now, it's real easy in hindsight to play Monday morning quarterback and say, well, he didn't have a gun in his belt and he was having an epileptic fit and that's why he was doing what he was doing. So what I had to do was determine whether or not Officer Seacatz committed a crime based upon what he knew and what he did at the time. And Mr. Green was still resisting. Now, he was having an epileptic seizure, so maybe he wasn't resisting, maybe it was the seizure. But to Officer Seacatz, the other 3 or 4 officers were unable to bring his hands behind his back so they could handcuff him. So Seacatz thought the only way I could aid in getting Mr. Green to comply was to kick him in the head. I don't agree with the conduct. I don't agree with the use of force policies that allow him to do that, but the bottom line is they were in effect at the time, and it gave the officer, according to his own training, the right to do that.
Mr. DA, to be quite frank, there was 4 or 5 officers on top of this guy. And the way Officer Seacatz rushed out of his vehicle, I think he had time to see any hands being moved. The only thing he saw was this guy's head, and he's pissed off at something, and he kicked him in the head. Has nothing to do with it. Has nothing to do with him resisting arrest. Because if 4 or 5 officers can't subdue a suspect, all 4 or 5 of those officers should be suspended.
Not officers.
They shouldn't be cops anymore. And it took this one officer, courageous guy, after this diabetic suspect is being held down by 4 or 5 officers who has guns. It took this one courageous officer, Officer Sergeant Seacatz, to come out of his car and kick the guy in the head, and he's the one that become the hero and have them handcuffed them. Really?
And it's exactly that kind of incident and that kind of a decision that makes citizens lose confidence in the DA and the sheriff and the police department, because it's clear. You can argue all day long about the training the police officer received and how he may have felt justified and how people are really easy to judge and quick to be Monday morning quarterbacks, like you said, but when you watch the video, it's clear. He made a snap decision. He was arrogant in his actions. His goal through his body language was clearly to cause damage to this guy who had made him angry. And he was already down. He couldn't get away. He couldn't fight back. And the cop attacked him for no apparent reason. Well, it wasn't to subdue him. He was already subdued. You could argue that he may have been going for a gun and going to shoot somebody, but there were other options he could have used before the kicking in the head. He could have jumped on top of him. He could have grabbed his arm. He could have done many other things. He could have shot him in the leg. But he kicked him in the head. That's not subdued.
So you would advocate that he should have pulled his gun and shot him in the leg?
Absolutely not. I'm advocating that
you just said he could have done that.
He could have done many other things.
If I may interject, listening closely to Mr. DA, he said, based on the statutes and the law in Henderson, that the officer was not only within his rights, but procedurally, and I understand because I have police officers in my family and friends, but procedurally, officers are trained that when they are subduing a suspect or a person, when their hands are not behind their back being arrested, then you are to proceed forward that person is not under control. So I understand that, but the issue or the question may be is, training wise, is there a different type of training we could give officers, maybe to notice when a person is having a medical attack or something mental going on, and how to pursue it from that point? Because let's not argue.
Yeah, that's why it's called use of force review, because what level of force do you need
No.
somebody?
But
no, I understand what you're saying.
Because here's the thing. I'm from Cali, and I've seen people I've seen officers try to.
I've been in a fight. You don't stop and think about what's going on.
We're talking about 5 officers already on this guy.
Right, but hold on. I've seen a dozen officers try to subdue 1 or 2 people, and they pull out a gun, and everybody gets shot. So I've seen that. I've witnessed it. So just because there's 5 officers and 1 person, there's
You're right.
too many scenarios that
we're
can happen.
I'm conceding that. Mm-hmm. He could have had a gun, and he could have shot all the officers, and that's part of their training as well, and we all know that.
But the issue is the gentleman was having a seizure, and obviously there needs to be an addition or a different type of training for officers to help recognize that and to deal with it accordingly. Maybe we need to wait until paramedics or someone like that is on scene who can make a judgment call before taking further action.
But there's a lot of facts that we haven't even mentioned here, and I'm not defending anybody's actions, but Mr. Green in this case was speeding in excess of 90 miles an hour for about a 5-minute time frame. He was weaving, he was going in and out of lanes. The officers were trying to pull him over. He posed a serious danger. When you're going 90 miles,
Rodney King?
When you're going 90 miles an hour and you're refusing to pull over, the officers don't know why. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then when you pull him over and he refuses to come out of the car, and then when you pull him out, he's resisting. Okay? They didn't know why he was...
They said the same thing about Rodney King. And if you look at that video as well, I mean, they were beating him and he was trying to get away. They said that he was resisting arrest. Well, yeah, of course.
You know something? Mr. DA made a very good point. He said that's how the officers are trained.
Right.
But let me tell you how the military is trained, Mr. DA. We're trained to be aggressors. We're trained if anybody stepped to us to knock them the hell out. That means we should do it? No. We need to make a judgment call sometimes. If I was an officer and I seen that this particular, the same thing, I seen that this particular suspect has 5 officers on top of him, I don't need to go over there and add to it. I'll just back off and watch. That's exactly what I would do.
Actually, I think we have somebody on the line waiting with a question for the DA. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Philip Moss. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C.
Oh, well, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling in. How can we help you?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I do have a question for the district attorney. I just noticed on his biographical material, the dean of your alma mater law school is Stephen Smith, who is a former student of mine. I taught law at the University of Iowa years ago, and then practiced in Washington. And in my old age, I'm sort of a troublemaker, and I've been looking for cases of wrongful conviction. I do a certain amount of writing, and there's a case that just stands out as being a case where, I've read the transcript and everything, it appears the defendant was clearly innocent. The Kirsten Lobato case, which is now on appeal before the Nevada Supreme Court. And I guess what I would ask, and I know how hard it is to get post-conviction relief and how reluctant people are to reopen things, but I would just ask that you find it in your heart to have somebody take an independent, fresh look at this with an open mind. I think if you do, it just appears to me to be a case where I've written about this, and I've said I'm probably more likely to have committed this crime than she is. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
What's the question, sir?
Well, the question is, are you going to take a fresh look at it, have somebody take a fresh look at it, and if they determine she's innocent, drop the case?
Well, I'm generally familiar with the case you're talking about, sir. That is a case that is still pending review and is before our Nevada Supreme Court. I've been asked in a letter-writing campaign by a number of people and by individual phone calls and emails to take a fresh look, and my prosecutors have taken a fresh look. And in our opinion, it is a case that is worth still pursuing in the appellate process, and perhaps this person will get relief by an appellate court or not. We'll just have to wait and see, but I'm not going to comment too much on any particulars involving a pending case.
Well, thank you so much for the call.
Thank you, sir.
I want to get back to, if we could real quick, the cases you mentioned that you have made a decision on. I'm assuming those are now public knowledge. Can you comment on any of those cases? Or were there any determinations you made that were Have
you read any of the decisions I'm talking about? Okay, if you go on the Clark County website.
Are you kidding? I thought you were somebody else.
Yeah, if you go on the Clark County website and you go to the DA page, you can go to DA decisions, and you can read all 8 decisions that I've released in the last 45 days.
Oh, so you've published them on
They
your
are
website?
written decisions that are on our website.
Great.
Yes.
So since we're sitting here talking about them, can you
Which
kinda
ones?
share?
I mean, I've got 8 decisions
pick the first
involving.
one. What was the first one?
Well, let me pick one that stands out.
Yeah,
in my
because
mind.
we're running straight out of time,
Let me
and
pick one.
anybody
I'll
can go on
cut
our
to-
website.
I'll do one in particular. I don't remember the person's name, but a police officer was called by a bar owner to respond to the bar because he was going to do a bar check. And that's very common where police officers in their district or in their jurisdiction will once in a while go into bars or restaurants just to take a look-see, to chat with the owner, primarily the smaller bars and the smaller situation. So the bar owner called a police officer, hey, come on by, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. The police officer walks into the bar, and unbeknownst to him, a patron sitting at the bar who had been a little unruly with the bartender had, within the last 30 to 60 minutes, committed another robbery. So when the police officer in uniform walked inside the bar, not knowing that this guy sitting at the bar had previously committed a robbery in the same general area within minutes, the patron at the bar thought the officer was there to perhaps try and arrest him. The guy pulls out
Actually,
a gun,
I think I did hear about
points it
this.
at the police officer. The police officer, he's thinking, oh my God, why is this guy pulling a gun at me? Tells him to put the gun down. The guy doesn't put the gun down. The police officer has no choice but to defend himself and others in the bar, so he shot and killed him.
That's justified.
Okay.
I have to. Yeah, I
Okay.
can't disagree
But,
with
You know,
that.
we're dealing with a lot of people, because I'm keeping track. Most of the people so far that are the victims, if you will, of officer-involved use of force deaths are under the influence of drugs, most of them, or are suffering some other mental health issue. They're depressed, they're suicidal, they're hallucinogenic. So officers don't know that when they come upon these scenes. So that's just one example. I've got another one that's going to be...
No. Stop right there, because if they want to see those, they could go on the website.
Absolutely.
We have very important questions to ask you, Mr. D.
Absolutely.
One of the questions is referred to the sheriff. There's an NRS out there, and I forget exactly which one, but it says that only 3 people could arrest a sit-in sheriff. Are you familiar with it? One is yourself. The other one is the state attorney general. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how this one got tossed in there, is the Clark County coroner. Which
Probably
is
a statute that was written 50 to 100 years ago.
Do you think...
when Las Vegas had a population of about 80,000.
Do you think that statute should change? Because, and the reason why I'm talking about this, because I've had officers come to me and said that they have went to the sheriff's house on two separate occasions on domestic violence cases. They also said that the sheriff has taken that out of scope. That means if you run his address, you won't see it in there anymore. Aren't those two things a misdemeanor crime? And should the sheriff be above the law? Because apparently he is. If there's only 3 people in this whole state that could arrest him, of course I'm going to feel entitled. I'm going to feel like I'm above the law. I'm going to feel like I could go around and slap my wife or whatever, or do whatever misdemeanor thing, and you can't do a damn thing to me. So is the sheriff above the law? Because that's what I'm seeing with the statute. How do you feel about that?
I don't think the sheriff is above the law.
Okay.
I think the sheriff is like yourself and myself. And if I'm involved in a domestic violence situation, although I have 27 and a half years of marriage, so there's no domestic
But you don't have
violence.
that statute that covers you, though.
That statute...
Your bruises hide well.
I would submit to you, Mr. Sanson, that statute does not preclude the fact that if the sheriff or anybody is involved in a domestic violence situation or involved in any criminal conduct and a police officer is called to the scene, that police officer doesn't need to then call the coroner to make an arrest. I'm unaware of anything you're talking about with regard to the sheriff, but I can tell you that the sheriff is no different than anybody else, like myself or yourself. If the police are called to your house tonight and your wife says that you hit her,
they're going to hear the name Steve Sanson automatically. I'm going to get arrested.
They're going to conduct an investigation, and if they determine that there's probable cause to believe you committed a crime, you're going to be arrested.
All right. Well, speaking of that, let me jump to something else. I got to ask you this question, Mr. DA.
Call me Steve, please.
I got to ask you this question,
I feel like
a
it's a little too
DA?
formal here.
Mr. Wolfson.
Sir.
Did Clark County Commissioner Steve Sisolak call you regarding an investigation of former Henderson City Councilwoman Kathleen Booten Vermillion?
Did he call me?
Did he call you?
I've actually met with the commissioner. I've actually spoken to him probably 1 or 2 times. Commissioner Sisolak is not different than a lot of other potential victims in crimes, where we will sometimes interview the potential victims of crimes in our assessment of whether or not to charge a person with a crime.
So any citizens could call you up and ask you about it?
We meet with victims on a regular basis. It's very often the case where cases are submitted to us for consideration of prosecution, and we have follow-up questions. A sexual assault case, any kind of case that you can imagine, the victim of a theft crime. We will call that victim up and ask follow-up questions. Absolutely, it's very common.
And I have this question regarding police shootings, because I was talking to a number of officers. They said that's a violation of their constitutional right. Should there be drug testing for officers that involved in OIS, which is officer-involved shootings? Because there's drug testing involved in workman's comp cases. Why shouldn't there be drug testing involved when an officer decides to pull his weapon and fire, and especially killing another human being?
That's a question for the sheriff. That's a question for the officer's employer. I don't supervise police officers during the course and scope of their employment, so that's a question more for the sheriff than me.
You got a question?
Oh, I was just going to tell you we have a caller. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, let's bring the caller on. Caller?
Yes.
Do you have a question for the district attorney?
Yes. This is Michelle Kozlowski in Douglas County, Nevada.
I used to live up there.
Excuse me?
I used to live up there. Great place.
Hanging in there. I just wanted to let you know that pretty much the setting the tone for persons in law enforcement has to do with POST, which is Police Officer Standard and Training up here in Carson City. And the current commission has a lot to do with that tone, because we are dealing with a near fatal police brutality on my husband.
We're kind of short on time, so could you...
Okay.
Do you have a question, Michelle, for the DA?
Can he give more input to his people in the Clark County area to give more input on handling persons who are mentally ill, or because a lot of times...
Yeah, I'm actually familiar with POST, what she's talking about, and Gillespie has refused to accept POST training for his officers, and that might be something you want to look into and maybe suggest.
We need some.
I don't know that the sheriff has rejected POST training for his police officers. Michelle, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of individuals out there that, like I said before, that are suffering from some mental health problem. And the officers do receive training because so many of their calls relate to a person who is mentally ill or suffering a mental health episode. I know the officers are specially trained and are sensitive to those individuals they come into contact with.
Well, District Attorney, thank you so much for your time and being here.
Thank you. Can we give the caller a phone number or something? Will she get information?
No, I know her. I have her information. Thank you so much, Michelle, for the question. I just want to let everybody know that the Veterans in Politics International is tired of crappy coroner's inquests, tired of crappy use of force boards, tired of crappy citizens review boards. All the board members that we have seen in the past have found officers justifiable, whether they had their hands behind their back and get shot or whatever the case might be. I have never seen any officer get excusable or criminal in any coroner's inquest or any use of force board or any citizens review board. And I just want to add this. The Veterans in Politics International, we're not against the police department by any means, but we are against bad cops, bad policies, bad leadership, and we're against elected officials that don't have the backbone to stand up against this injustice.
For our citizens.
Have the backbone, guys. We had Roger Tobler, mayor of Boulder City, that went in front of a camera and had some backbone, and we need more elected officials to do that, because once we get rid of the corruption that's going on in the police department, I think that the citizens of Clark County would not be afraid of their police officers when they pull them over. And this has no reflection on District Attorney Steve Wolfson. Just wanted to add that. Thank you so much, GA.
My pleasure. Invite me back again.
This is Steve Sampson, Andre Haynes, and Karen Steelmon with Veterans in Politics.
Have a great day.
Views and opinions expressed on this program were those of the hosts and guests and did not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.